Welcome back to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gaughan, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entertainment entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, Dave Filoni, and Jon Favreau, as well as the rest of the team of Lucasfilm, have dreamed up over the past 43 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and we are recording this on October 16th, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, pop culture enthusiast and all-around good guy, Brian Gaughan, who's undertaking a kind of unique project for the better part of October, sort of a cinematic celebration of Halloween, if it were. Brian, can you explain what you've been up to?
Yeah, for my 5 or 6 or so people who follow me on Instagram. No, there's more. A couple years ago, what I did was I went out and I bought these cool Halloween t-shirts. And every day I would wear a different Halloween t-shirt and I would take a picture of it and what it means to me. And Jaws is my favorite movie and things like that. And it was fun. And then didn't do anything last year. But then this year I decided I was going to watch a horror movie every day and then write about it the next day and put it up there. It's funny how I'm finding films that kind of tell a story of where I was at the time I saw it. I mean, most of these films mean a lot to me, even the ones that I've just discovered. And I asked you what your favorite scary movie was, so I could watch it and write about it.
And of course, this is what I do. I threw Brian a curveball because my favorite horror movie is Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein from June of 1948. By the way, I am serious about this.
Yep.
If you actually watch this movie, first of all, the monsters, or at least 2 of them in this thing, are played by the actors who created these roles. You've got Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula. You've got Lon Chaney Jr. as Lawrence Talbot, the Wolfman. And they play the monsters, the Universal classic monsters, straight. By the way, the movie has amazing production values. I mean, but again, Universal's had these horror sets lying around, so it's just sort of like, hey, you need a laboratory. Right, I got one of those. Abbott and Costello are in top form. And by the way, their careers were on the skids at the time at the studio. And the success of this movie, and I think, Brian, you were the one who were talking about what it was the second cheapest movie for Universal to make that year, and it was the second highest grossing.
Yep.
Yeah. So it actually bought Bud and Lou another 7 years of employment at Universal. In fact, the irony here is the very last film they made under the Universal contract was yet another meeting with another classic Universal monster, and that was Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy in June of 1955. But seriously, folks, if you this Halloween season, if you want to laugh, you want to be frightened, and you want to see a really cool Dracula changing from human form into a bad effect that was done with using hand-drawn animation, watch Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yeah, wasn't that was done by Walter Lantz, right? The guy who did Woody Woodpecker.
Would have to have been.
And also the credits, I think, were done by him too.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, and it was Brian, when I was telling him this, who actually pointed out the Lucasfilm tie-in, which was when ILM wanted to do a full-length CG film.
They were going to do Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And they got heavily into production.
They did.
I don't know what happened, but it would have been their first full-length animation movie.
Yeah. We got a lot of news this week, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, want to acknowledge our sponsor, and that's touringplans.com. And if you're headed down to the City Beautiful anytime soon to experience any of the theme parks that can be found in and around Orlando, well, Touring Plans can not only help you save time, it can also help you save money as you wander around Walt Disney World or the parks to be found over at the Universal Orlando Resort. So please check them out at touringplans.com. Okay, and before we get to the news, I want to talk about a wee bit of non-news. TMZ, earlier this week, ran a piece with this headline. Star Wars child star Jake Lloyd seen for the first time in over a year. And the cutting-edge journalism here, a paparazzi caught this now 34-year-old former actor, now private citizen, outside of his gym vaping. And, evidently the big news that got broken in this piece was that it was Jake had been seen recycling a couple of protein shake boxes. And, folks, look, this guy has had a rough couple of years, mental health-wise.
Yeah.
And is making a conscious decision to be outside of the spotlight. And I wish that people would actually respect Jake Lloyd's wishes and let him be. I mean, look, I get it. Young Anakin Skywalker, big part of your childhood. But that doesn't mean that the adult Jake Lloyd owes you anything. So just let the guy be, okay? And if anything, what kind of frustrates me is that, here he's being artificially thrust into the spotlight, whereas we just lost Robert Watts, the longtime production manager, producer at Lucasfilm. And now here's a guy we should be talking about. I got his start in the business as an assistant director on Thunderball. And that was legitimately one of the Sean Connery Bonds, right? Thunderball?
Yeah, it was. I think it might have been his last one.
Okay. Now, so he gets a start as assistant director on that. Then Watts winds up as a unit manager on Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it was done back in 1968, and it was on that project that he got a really good reputation in London filmmaking circles. That this was a guy you could toss in the deep end. When it came to a project of size with a lot of visual effects, and this is what reportedly put Robert on George Lucas's radar when he came over to the UK to shoot the original Star Wars. And as the story goes, Lucas was so impressed with Watts' work ethic, and what he did to make Star Wars possible, that as soon as he was getting Empire up out of the ground, he hired Watts to be that film's associate producer. And from then on, Lucas was like, hey, we're doing Raiders and I need you on that. And he did such a great job on the first indie movie that George then gave him a further promotion on Return of the Jedi. He was now the co-producer of the movie. I got lucky enough once to talk with Robert. He would do the...
Oh, you did?
And flat out asked him, when you think about all the effects films he worked on, it's like, what was the toughest one? He said immediately, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh, well, yeah.
That was impossible. And ILM did so much of the work, effects work in that. And he talked about the fact that the thing that's made him a little crazy about Roger Rabbit is some of the very best effects work you never notice in that. But anyway, to get back to Robert Watts now, he died at his home in West Sussex earlier this month at the age of 86. And so Gaughan and I would like to extend our heartfelt condolences to his friends and family. And again, you're in your 60s. 86 suddenly feels very close. Yes. On the other hand, someone who is going strong at the age of 92 is Academy Award winner John Williams, who, by the way, will be honored with a documentary that looks back at his career, music by John Williams, which debuts next month. In fact, on November 1st on Disney Plus. And given what they just did with the that wonderful documentary about Jim Henson, I'm very much looking forward to this. Some of the people they've got to look back at John's career, we're talking obviously the people who worked with him, Steven Spielberg, right, Kathleen Kennedy, Frank Marshall, folks like J.J. Abrams and Ron Howard. Chris Columbus, who I love that they got Chris Columbus in there, because one would argue Uh, the score for Home Alone and the score for the first couple of Harry Potters that John had a hand in were
Right.
lovely. By the way, Brian, I have to ask if you were picking out a favorite piece of Williams music, what would you go with?
Well, I think we've talked about this before. I like the March of 1941. That's one of my favorite
Mm.
pieces. I got to see him perform it live a couple
Oh,
times.
okay. And again, you may not be familiar with the 1941 March, but of course you're familiar with the Raiders March. And speaking of
Oh yeah.
Raiders, on October 1st this month, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, all
Went bye-bye.
off of Disney Plus, which leaves Dial of Destiny as the only indie film left over there, along with a couple of tie-in specials. Now,
And young Indiana
well,
Jones.
but now, just to be clear here, what's gone on here is that Disney had made an arrangement with the folks at Paramount, especially around when Indy was arriving in theaters last year, that they wanted Disney Plus viewers to be excited with the hope that they would then go out and buy tickets to Dial of Destiny. Didn't quite work out,
Yeah.
and so they licensed the right to stream the first four films in the series over on Disney Plus. It was a limited time arrangement, which and now these films. It's not a Willow situation where they're pulled down, or Willow the
And
series. Yeah.
disappear.
These are, you want to go see them, they will be popping up over at Paramount Plus.
Also on Prime
Okay,
Video.
so there we go. But I know there were some folks who saw that happen and tried to make that a thing, and it's like, no, it just Disney made this deal for a limited amount of time, and the time is now over. Now, speaking of indie, a lot of folks are looking forward to the indie themed redo of Dinosaur the Ride, which was announced at the D23 Expo back in August. And this will be based on the ride we all know from Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Seas, only with a brand new baddie, some sort of Mayan creature or god. Now,
That's going to be cool.
we finally have some project start dates.
Oh, good.
What we know so far is that Triceratops spin Chester and Hester's Dinorama, and we're talking mostly about the games in that side of the park, and the gift shop. That all goes behind construction fences starting on January 12th of next year. Now, Dinosaur the Ride and Restaurantosaurus and the Boneyard Play Area. I'm being told that will stay up and will be available to folks visiting Animal Kingdom at least through the April school vacation of next year. Now,
Okay.
that said, the new Tropical Americas themed land for Animal Kingdom is supposed to be up and running for 2027. So, work will get underway soon-ish. I guess we're looking at probably within the next 6 months. But again, Triceratops Spin in the Dinorama area behind the fence come January 12th. Let's see.
Now is it's going to be Indiana Jones theme and also
In Kento.
Encanto. Now, they'll be like near each other and stuff. Will the restaurant be themed to one of those? Will they have a
Yes,
restaurant?
the restaurant remains, but again, it's going to be reinvented to have a menu that supports the overall theme of the area, which is the tropical Americas.
Okay, they should do something like Bengal barbecue. I mean, because that's one of the best places in
No,
Disney.
no doubt. But again,
Yeah.
the notion is that,
Yeah, it has to be South
there we go.
American and stuff
There we
like
go.
that. Yeah.
Okay,
Empanadas, I guess, are big South American
there we
stuff.
go. But again, that won't open until 2027. But in between there,
And we're going to do a live broadcast, right?
Don't know about that. We also have an update on The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Do we?
Yep. Again, that's going to be arriving in theaters May 22nd, 2026.
Oh, so they're using Star Wars dates to release them.
They want this to be significant with the fans.
Right, but that's like, May 25th, that Wednesday, it's probably the same thing on a Wednesday. So maybe it's a good luck thing.
We can only hope.
Yeah.
Now, would that we had good news coming off of The Mandalorian Grogu, but Tamora Morrison, because remember, we had this project described as kind of the Avengers of Star Wars, or at least new Star Wars, with the notion that we were going to get Grogu and the Mandalorian and Ahsoka Tano, and the insinuation early on was that Boba Fett would be part of the film, but Tamora Morrison at Fan Expo in Chicago revealed that they're shooting and they have not called him.
Do you think he was like sour grapes, or do you think he just maybe he's trying to pressure them or something?
No, I mean, he was talking about how he believed it was the reception of the Book of Boba Fett that sort of, queered the deal, so to speak. That he wasn't invited to the table. And now, mind you, it's a bummer about Boba Fett. I enjoyed Tamora's work in that limited series. But on the other hand, what's kind of interesting is at another fan event. In fact, this was L.A. Comic-Con. Ewan McGregor was talking about the Obi-Wan Kenobi limited series, and that he mentioned that he and Disney and Lucasfilm are exploring further ideas in regard to that Jedi Master, and it's like we should do something else here. There's another opportunity here, so they're looking for a story right now.
Now, do you think they gave him permission to drop that kind of information?
I have been to enough fan events where no.
Oh, okay.
It's one of these things where, you get an actor up on stage and Chatty Cathy is up there, and
all of a sudden we got a code red.
Yeah, but, conversely, though, I don't know. I mean, yes. So, okay, cool. We might see Ewan McGregor back as, a young Obi-Wan Kenobi, or a young Gish. On the other hand, I'm pretty sure at this point, when it comes to Disney, at least live action, we're not going to see Grand Moff Tarkin anytime soon. Ooh, did you see this lawsuit about...
Yeah, but it doesn't smell right to me. It seems that, Disney, they don't make these kind of mistakes. They went to the right people. And all of a sudden, this guy comes out of nowhere and he says, hey, before he died, he said I could have the rights. And they already paid the family. They already paid the estate. And then all of a sudden, this guy says he has well, we have to say who it is, Peter Cushing, of course. And it doesn't, I don't know, does it make a lot of sense to you, especially in this day and age?
It just, well, look, this is sort of terra incognito. And I think, Disney thought that, again, because they'd made a payment to the family and things were kosher. But this gentleman, Kevin Francis, sued Lucasfilm in England, and Disney and Lucasfilm were hoping to get it dismissed, and a judge over there believes this is still worth exploring because, again, this is creating law. The whole notion of this guy, a year before Peter Cushing died, he supposedly signed a letter and handed to this guy that you now have control of over my likeness. And this was something that Disney's lawyers, when they were setting up this character's return in Rogue One, somehow missed. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because this was the second time that Disney tried to get this lawsuit dismissed, and the judge is like, no, we're going to explore this. So let's see where this goes. But and of course, the irony here is this is only the on-camera likeness of the live action Peter Cushing. On the other hand, the animated version of Moff Tarkin, it's turned up in all sorts of series. I mean, a bunch of Star Wars Rebels episodes. In fact, by the way, that show is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. The very first episode dropped on October 3rd, 2014. So we should maybe think about talking about that on an upcoming show. But something else that is celebrating an anniversary this year is Radio Land Murders.
A film that nobody knows about.
Yeah. And it's ironic because when you're an old fart like myself and Brian, I mean, we were hearing about Radio Land Murders back in the 70s because this was something that George Lucas was going to do right after
American Graffiti.
Graffiti, yeah. Okay, well, and speaking of which, next week, Radio Land Murders will be celebrating its 30th anniversary of its release to theaters. And by the way, Brian and I will talk about that at length on the second half of today's show. But first, a little commercial break. And we're back. And before we get started here again, folks, Brian has some a Star Wars related book that you'd like to talk up?
There is a writer, her name is S.T. Bende, and she does things for Insight Publishing, and they do a lot of Disney and Star Wars stuff. And mainly, or a lot what they do are cookbooks. And she's written the cookbook for Frozen. She's written the cookbook for Pixar, and which I have. And also she is part of a group of people who write these books that have been published, and I got to see advanced copies at Comic-Con, and one is the Empire Strikes Back visual guide.
Archive.
Yeah. And it's really great because it's not just there's pictures, there's artwork, there's stories, there's all sorts of it's a definitive history of the making of that movie. The first title, the first poster that came out, The Revenge of the Jedi. I mean, it's really well done. And now the one that she's coming out with, it comes out November 5th. And it's called The Bestiary, Volume 1 of all the Star Wars animals, and she writes it, and then there's also an illustrator, and they're putting that's coming out November 5th. You can get it on, of course, Amazon. So, but she also has some cute books. She has the Tiny Book of Jedi and the Tiny Book of the Sith. So these are really cool, and then she also has her own YA series about Norway, and it's a very family friendly story about Vikings. So it's like they're really good, and I think she may be a fan of the show. Yeah, she may even listen to this.
Okay, well, best of luck to ST with all of her new books. So, all right. Anyway, we were just talking about the 10th anniversary of Star Wars Rebels, but I which again enjoyed right from the get-go. But another animated Star Wars item that I have, me personally, been enjoying are those Lego Star Wars specials.
I love those things.
Yep. We got the first in 2020 with the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. Then in 2021, we got the Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tale, which has
that was great.
One of my favorite vocal performances by Dana Schneider as a Jabba the Hutt's cousin.
Right.
And then finally, we had the Star Wars Summer Vacation in 2022. And recently, in fact, as of last month, September 13th, we got our first mini-series from these folks, Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy, a 4-part miniseries. And you had some thoughts about it, Brian.
Yeah, I think it's ways these Lego things don't have to follow any canon that the movies have, and they can make fun of them, but they do it in a very respectful way. And the other, they would change characters, or they would, the other ones, they would turn, Darth Vader goes to the beach, the same beach from Rogue One, and and bombs are going, whatever. But this one, they took it one step further. They would destroy everything and they rebuild it, and then everything would be the same yet different. And most characters, if they were good in the original show, they would be evil. If they were evil, they were good. But the main thing about it, what I really liked about it, was they had a whole group of Sith, which is terrific.
Yeah, that's, and well, I mean, for me, it's like Darth Jar Jar, but
Oh yeah,
not just Darth Jar Jar. They actually brought in Ahmed Best,
Yep.
to voice the evil Jar Jar. And we also get what is it, C-3PO as a bounty hunter, a very
Yeah,
polite bounty hunter, but still a bounty hunter.
with red eyes.
Yeah, and just overall, I mean,
Darth Vader is he's a good guy, and he's all white, which looks really weird because he looks like an albino Darth Vader.
yeah, he looks like he's made out of white chocolate.
Yeah.
There's something very wrong there. But anyway, I mean, I think it's very well written. I think, and some of your observations about, for example, Luke is basically the dude from the Big Lebowski,
Dude,
right?
it was hilarious. And the dude's Luke's money. He talks
Yep.
about Luke in the third person too. And it's just, and then he realizes that Vader's his father, and and Leia, and they're getting together, and it leads to there could be another series.
This is true. And by the way, Luke in this, it's Mark Hamill back, and
Yep.
clearly
Oh,
having
that's
a lot of fun
amazing.
playing a slacker version of of Luke Skywalker, who, by the way, on this show, Tatooine isn't a desert planet; it's a water planet.
So he's a surfer.
He gets so he gets to hang out at the Mos Eisley Cantina Marina, which again, it's fun.
Isn't this the first time he's ever got to do his own voice?
I wonder.
Because it was really weird, because I was listening to him and I'm going, I don't know, the guy who does an imitation of Luke sounds a lot more like him than Hamill does, and I'm realizing this is the only time that he's really he's playing Mark Hamill. And it's really cool to hear this. The direction of the voices were great too. The two leads were amazing. The kid from Stranger Things, and also the guy who played Flash in Spider-Man movies. They were really good. There was a lot of emotion in their performances.
Yeah, I mean, I did for something that could have easily been a goof. They did. I'm always amazed when they work with the Legos, how much
Oh yeah.
good story and animation in there. But anyway, if you get a chance, folks, do check that out. Again, that's Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy.
Yeah, it's really worth watching, especially for the explosions. You can see the tiny little round things in the explosions. It really is amazing what they've done.
Okay. Now, in addition to that, we, of course, are mentioning before we went to break, Radioland Murders. And again, 30th anniversary this month. And by the way, we talked about Abbott Costello at the top of today's show. And what's interesting about this Lucasfilm production is that it has a surprisingly strong tie to Bud and Lou. And when I say that, anybody who's seen Indy, anybody who's seen Star Wars understands that George Lucas had a great love of Saturday morning serials.
Right.
But what's important to understand here is that George didn't see those in theaters. George saw those on television. All right. And among the other things that he saw on television, because like he and Spielberg sat there as a small child. By the way, Brian, I wanted to ask if there was an amazing moment out of Barry Levinson's Avalon, where
Right.
it talks about when a television came into the house, and it showed a bunch of the kids sitting in front of the television with the set on, and they're just staring intently at it, waiting for something to happen. And at one point, one of the kids turns to the other one and goes, I think it's going to happen now. And then suddenly, it's the test pattern. Was that something you ever did as a kid? Because I remember doing that. I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Again, this was back in the days when, there were 3 channels, and it was a very big deal when you got a 4th channel.
Well, I had we got our first color TV, and I think I must have been like 5 or 6. And it was when they started showing every year, they would show Wizard of Oz. Oh, yeah. Now, I had never seen Wizard of Oz, but I've heard about Wizard of Oz. So I was looking forward to seeing Wizard of Oz in color. Well, needless to say, the first 20 minutes of Wizard of Oz is not in color.
Yeah.
And I thought there was something wrong with our new TV. I was losing my mind. And my dad, he didn't remember. And he's like trying to go, no, I remember it being in color. And then all of a sudden it was in color, and my life was good again. But yeah, I remember like if we were allowed to stay up late, at 11 o'clock or 11:30, because the news was on at 11. If it wasn't Channel 4 with Johnny Carson, it was the pattern.
But also remember that they also played the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, right.
You watched the jets fly, you saw the flag fly, and then we now end our broadcast day. And you can't explain that to kids today. It's
no,
like, it went off. It went off.
Especially like I had broken up with my first girlfriend, and when when those things happen, you can't go to sleep, and there was nothing on TV, nothing. You couldn't watch. There was no VCR. There was nothing. So what I did is I was working at the movie theater. I would go to the theater at 3 o'clock in the morning and show myself a movie.
Wow.
Well, so now, that was mine.
Okay. Speaking of showing a movie, again, Lucas, not just a fan of the Saturday morning serials, but also loved the brash comedies of the 1940s. And
the screwball
Abbott Costello
films.
were the kings of this form.
Right.
And interesting story. They met in burlesque in 1935. In fact, as the story goes, the stooge that Abbott worked with, he was the straight man at a comedy team. His stooge was sick, so Lou Costello filled in temporarily. They clicked, and then things began to move very fast. By 1938, they were making, after becoming huge on the vaudeville burlesque circuit, they made their debut in radio on the Kate Smith Show. By 1939, they're on Broadway in a stage show called Streets in Paris, which led to Universal hiring them, gave them a 2-picture contract, and they were they had supporting roles in a film called Night in the Tropics, which came out in November of 1940, and did not do particularly well at the box office, but there was a producer at Universal who thought, I can maybe do something with these guys, and he put them in a cheapy comedy. In fact, what's kind of interesting is it was a service comedy, because war had already started in Europe, World War II. And America knew that it was going to get pulled into the war eventually. So, service and, that sort of thing were on people's mind. But here's the thing, Brian. Night in the Tropics, Universal releases in the theaters November 14th, 1940. Buck Privates, the film that effectively broke through for Abbott Costello, It was out in theaters on January 31st, 1941. So that's, am I doing the math here right? That's 2.5 months later. They worked that quickly and got that
Oh,
film
wow.
out the door. Because again, they had to see them up on the screen in Night in the Tropics, and it's like, wow, okay, maybe do something with these guys, and then they actually start in on a kind of a mystery comedy called Hold That Ghost,
Right.
but Buck Province is making so much money they literally stopped production, and are like, whoa,
Isn't that the
people.
song where Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy was from?
I want to say yes. The
Okay.
Andrew sisters were
Right.
in these things. Okay. But anyway, Buck Privates is making so much money for the studio. They're like, whoa, we need to get these guys in a service comedy as quickly as possible. So, they go from being in the Army to in the Navy. In fact, that's the name of the movie, In the Navy, which is out in theaters May 31st of 1941. So 4 months later, they're in another service comedy. They then go back to finishing Hold That Ghost, the mystery comedy. That's now out in theaters August
Oh
6th of
my
41.
gosh.
And then they're like, whoa, okay, let's strike while the iron's hot here. Let's do another service comedy. So they do one about the Air Force, Keep 'em Flying. That arrives in theaters November 28th, 1941. And just, what is that? 9 days after that is Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And but here's the irony. Now the thinking at Universal is like, okay, no more service comedies. We're actually in the
Uh,
war. People want to be entertained. They want to be distracted. So they put Abbott and Costello. First, they do a cowboy comedy, Ride 'em Cowboy, go out in theaters February 20th, 1942. Then, and this is one of those moments where it's like, these guys are making so much money for the studio at this point. MGM actually pays Universal for the privilege of putting Abbott and Costello in a movie. They make
oh, really?
a comedy, Rio Rita, which is a non-musical version of a hit Broadway musical. And then finally, we get the film that George Lucas saw and thought, oh, I gotta do me one of those. And that is Who Done It, which is a comedy mystery set at a radio station. And by the way, this came out November 6th, 1942. So just to review here, Brian, Abbott and Costello, inside of 2 years, shot 9 movies.
Oh, wow.
8 of them for Universal and one for MGM, and just banged them out during that period and made money hand over fist. But anyway, like I said, Radioland or Who Done It is sort of the template for Radioland murders. So, you want to talk about your thoughts on this Lucasfilm production?
I remember reading about it, not when it first was on the books, but
Mm-hmm.
after Star Wars. And it was going to star Steve Martin and Cindy Williams.
Yeah, and you get that.
Yeah.
Cindy Williams, George had found her, and she had, well, I want to say at that point she would have done both American Graffiti and
And more
more.
American. Yeah.
So she was a good and loyal Lucasfilm employee, and Steve Martin was just breaking through at that point.
Right. And it would have been a film of that time, and it would have worked because it was a just like What's Up Doc. It was a kind of parody. It
Mm-hmm.
had the snappy dialogue. It
It did.
had it was funny. It was mysterious. It had a good plot, but it was a good. The script was supposedly really good, and there was a lot of things that pre-baby boomers would have gotten, and that's who the movie was written for. It was written for the people who saw His Girl Friday in the theaters, and it would have been, a nice little. And then Steve Martin would have been perfect in it.
Well, the thing I heard, and it's kind of ironic because we were just talking about the 1941 March, but 1941, of course, is a period
Right.
comedy set in the days just after Pearl Harbor. That one, oh God, it was so expensive. It was Universal and Columbia that went on in together on the cost of production of that. And what's fascinating is they talked about back in the day about how that movie didn't make money stateside. But what's fascinating is it
Yeah.
made money overseas, quite a bit of money overseas. But it made money because it made Americans look very ridiculous. We
Yeah.
all looked very silly. But there were a number of people who suggested it was that. And what was the Mike Nichols thing with Jack Nicholson
The
and Stock
Fortune.
Exchange? Yeah.
Yeah. That was a
Another,
great movie. Oh my God, that was a great movie.
yeah,
Warren
but
Beatty and Jack Nicholson together. The Mousy Beds.
yeah, but same thing. Didn't make
No.
a lot of money and didn't get great reviews. And for a time there, period stuff. And remember that we had just had Paper Moon do big bucks
Right.
at the box office, and suddenly it's like, no, we're not making period movies, and we're certainly not making one set in the 1940s after what happened with
Yeah,
1941. But
but the thing about Moon is it gave us a gimmick, and it was in black and white. And that's what I think they should have done with this film, especially making it in 1994, finally making it in 1994. But the thing about 1941, they filmed a lot. It was originally a 3.5 hour movie. Now, you think of that and you're going, oh my God, who could sit through 3.5 hours of this? Well, you know that It's a Mad, 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 Mad World was a 3.5 hour movie. And it worked. And it is brilliant. And I think they could have pitched this as the 70s version of widespread goofy comedy with all these actors and stuff, but they panicked. They cut it down to exactly 2 hours, and then they released it. And now it's some people's favorite movies, and it's a lot of people's unfavorite movie. They think it's Spielberg's worst, but I disagree because I think the film really has great bones.
I mean, it's interesting you said that, because if we pivot now back to the template film
Right.
for Radioland Murders, Who Done It?
Who
I
done it?
mean,
Right.
76 minutes long. I mean, that's how long. But
Right.
again, this is also in the era of you go to the movies and you see a double feature and a cartoon and a newsreel
And
and
sometimes a live burlesque show. Not burlesque, but you have vaudeville. Because my dad did that all the time in Chicago. He would go and he actually saw Abbott and Costello, Martin and Lewis, and all these people for, like he said, 35 cents. So it's like, yeah, Dad, 35 cents. But the thing about Radioland Murders is it was eventually done in 1994. And I don't know. I think it was basically Lucas saying, oh, maybe because Lucas was doing so well, Universal saying, well, we own this, you owe us. And so they did. But what they did was they didn't think baby boomers, who are now the people who went to the movie theater, would get all the old-timey jokes. So they took a lot of that out of it. Then they wanted the audience to feel comfortable, so they hired all TV actors for the cameo and background roles. The main people, Mary Stuart Masterson, who is brilliant because she plays Rosalind Russell. She plays, that snappy dialogue, Katharine Hepburn. And then you had Brian Benben. And Brian Benjamin was doing the John Landis film, or not
Dream
film,
On,
Dream On, the TV show,
the HBO show,
which is really one of the most underrated and ahead of its time shows that was ever done for cable or anything. And he was good, but he's not a leading man. And I think that might have hurt it too. Also, the comedy was too broad for a 1994 audience. And what I was thinking gimmick was just like they did with Dead Man Don't Wear Plaid. And I know they did it because that's the only way they could put in the old footage, but with Steve Martin, and they did it in black and white, and also I think they might have done it in the 133 format, which is weird because a lot of theaters did not have those lenses, so they had to give them the lenses. So I think that would have helped this film. This film bombed. It only made $1.5 million. Now the thing was, one reason Universal gave it the go was that Lucas was experimenting with backgrounds and buildings, a CGI version of these. Now, I think he did this film before Jurassic Park, but Jurassic Park was released before it. And he said, I could make sets with computers, and then we don't have to build sets. And they said, go for it. And it was a $10 million budget, which ballooned to $15 million. But even in 1994, that's an amazing budget. And the movie is not bad, but if they would have went with the gimmick, I think people would have saw it, because I'm one of the $1 million that came and saw that film, and I enjoyed it, because now if they would do this film now, all these films coming out like Knives Out and even like Agatha Christie and stuff, ensemble films, this film would bring in an audience, or at least would bring in a streaming audience. And right now you can't even get it on streaming, but I don't think it's a bad film, and I think that hopefully people who listen to this will go see it. Now you do have to rent it for, I think, $5 on Amazon, and then it's $4 if you do Fandango or something like that. But it's worth it. It's a good family film. It's a wholesome film. There are murders, but there's no blood. There's nothing intense enough that it will give you nightmares. But it is a fun film. And like I said, it was in 1974, it would have been of its time. In 1978, it would be above its time. In 1994, it was actually ahead of its time. In 2024, it would be of its time.
And again, the irony is the very thing you were talking about, the digital sets, that sort of thing, the CG. This was, in a way, the film that plowed the road for so much of the work that George then went on to do with Phantom Menace, and which, by the way, brings us round once more time to Jake Lloyd, and again, just leave the guy alone. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that is going to do it for this week, folks. Want to let you know that we have a brand new Looking at Lucasfilm in the works already for November 2nd. So, which, by the way, puts us just 1 month out from Star Wars Skeleton Crew, which Brian and I will be talking about.
Oh, I can't wait to see this thing.
So, all right. But while people are waiting, Brian, where can the nice people find you on social media?
Well, it's Instagram, BT Gaughan, Gaughan. If you go there now, you can see the movies I'm watching, and if you want to, you can give me a recommendation, and I'll try to watch it. Also, if you go back into my Instagram, you'll see the T-shirts that I was wearing a couple years ago. So it's a lot of fun. But I am going to be writing about, I just saw a movie today, which I think is going to be one of the best films of the year, and that's Saturday Night.
Oh
my gosh. I was sweating during the thing. I was so excited. And I think I embarrassed the other 4 people in the theater by laughing, cheering, and clapping. So
that's I've been looking forward to that one myself.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Okay. Now, as for me,
where can we find you, Jim?
You can find me on X, Twitter, whatever you call it, and over on Instagram as Jim Hill Media. Likewise on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. Beyond that, want to remind you we have some other shows here we'd love you to check out on the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. We, of course, have Disney Dish that I do with Len Testa. Likewise, we have Fine Tuning, which I do with Drew Taylor. That's our animation news and commentary show. We, in fact, just tonight recorded a brand new episode of the Epic Universal podcast with Eric Hersey, who produces a
Cool.
lot of the shows here. And his lovely bride and I will be recording, I think two
Really?
episodes of our merch podcast
I
this
love
weekend. I
that show
want that
too.
too.
Those are those
Yeah.
both are great shows. A lot of information, and I have to spend a lot of money after
Yeah,
listening to
there's
them.
that too. Also, want to remind folks of the show that we're hosting here, Manufacturing the Magic, from Noah and Shelley Valladolid.
Cool.
That's the history of themed entertainment. And then, of course, there is our Patreon effort, Disney Unpacked. That is Len and my first ever video series. We are doing that in collaboration with Jim Schul, who spent 30 plus years working at Disney Imagineering, working on some of your favorite attractions. We're just now working on a show about Equatorial Africa, the pavilion that almost got built
Oh,
at
cool.
Epcot, and we are in the research phase on a show about the extraterrestrial alien encounter, which, by the way,
Ah.
ILM was involved with very, very early on,
Did you
and
get
that's
to
in.
did you get to experience that? Because I did not.
I did. I did.
Okay.
I did not get to see it during the extra scary version that Michael Eisner shut down, but I got to see the newly enhanced version.
Okay.
But beyond that, folks, if you could do Brian and I a favor, if you could head on over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review, looking at Lucasfilm, that would be very helpful. It helps other folks find the show. And let's see. Again, we are produced fabulously by Eric Hersey and David Gray. So we want to thank them for their efforts, and also want to thank you for listening, folks. And like I said, Brian and I will be back with a brand new show in 2 weeks' time. And until then, you take care, okay?